Welcome to Ike Comics Draw Process. I'm drawing page 10 and 11 of episode 2 of First Sun and Sword today. That's my comic. I should say I'm going to show you page 10, the inks and the finished colored lettered page because I lost the video to it. But you'll see the whole process on page 11 here in this video. And like always, I'll share my thoughts along the way. Here we go. Okay, page 10. If you saw page 9 in the video for that, I explained how the first row of panels on this page are a repeat of the panels on the other page, except now his father is absent. We're telling the story visually of his father's absence, getting busy, getting stressed. I have updated the colors on all of the pages. I knew going into it that I wasn't certain about those colors. I just needed to make a choice because I complete one page at a time for the webcomic. But I knew that after I had more of them done, I might come up with a better idea for the colors, which I did. And I've gone back and updated all of them. You can see them on the website now. And on cleverkaiju.com, I'm starting a blog where I'm going to share some more behind the scenes stuff. So I'm going to explain at least there the before and after of the color changes I made and how I did that. I think these colors are much stronger. It's still in a limited palette. There's a much greater range from light to dark, and they're less golden and a little bit more well mixed. And there it is, the finished page. It starts with him, continuing his training alone, walking down a long hallway to see his father who's looking stressed. And he walks in and the father's like, well, please come in. Kind of a simple backgrounds that I threw in just from imagination in the moment. But with a few interesting elements, like the piece of art in the middle behind him ended up being a nice image, a sort of motif or allegory of something that between the father and son, or something about Sword, the boy here. And that's it. I noticed this whole scene I've been squeezing in. I've been trying to squeeze a lot of panels in to get it through it quickly. That's because this is like a scene of the past. It's sort of this dream sequence scene. And I don't want it to take too long before we get back to the main story. And so I've been kind of driven to add more panels per page and get to the point. And I wanted it to end on a page turn. So if I didn't tighten it up, that was another pressure I had. If I didn't add more panels in and get through it on that page turn, I would have to do 2 extra pages to get to it. And now I'm starting page 11. And this wraps it up. This odd page is a right-hand page in the book. It's on a page turn. So this wraps up the scene. This is where the father is giving Sword, his name is Aemon, giving him that coin that he wears around his neck on a string. So the coin is from his father, and his great-grandfather's kingdom, back when they minted their own coins before the lizard men took over. So it's this little piece of memory of this is who we were and who we can become again when the time comes that the lizard men in their kingdom falls, which will eventually come, and maybe in your lifetime. So the father is bestowing this gift and this hope on his son. And it tells us more about what is going on in Sword, this mercenary who lives a very disciplined life according to his own sort of philosophy that's definitely built on being a very strong person. and accepting fate and the truth in some way, and very individualistic, not really looking to lead his people or to. So seeing how already, even without seeing the rest of his story, at this point we're seeing already how he is a more complicated, person. These what I've done here is used a 5H pencil to go in and do pencils, and then if I need to add more pencils, I can just go with a heavier, darker pencil. I've done that before in this comic series, and sometimes I forget and I just jump right in with the 2H or the H, and it feels okay. But the problem is, the way that I draw, once I scribble out my forms, I might have to erase so that I can see more pencils added. And then when I ink, I'm inking on top of so much pencils that the inks aren't as clear. I'm not able to see them so clearly as I place them down. So if I do this lighter pencil work, I can still do my scribbling and finding forms and make it more dynamic and loose. And then I can tighten it up a little bit more and then ink right on top of it. So that's been the way I tackled that, and it just really flowed well on this page. Yeah, this framing and stuff, it flowed pretty smoothly for me. It's always, again, that dynamic of I could design and plan this out very carefully for composition, or there's a way to just kind of let it flow and just kind of put what you see. This second panel where the father's hand is holding up the coin. I positioned that where the coin is very large, and I've got that word balloon beneath it. I'm thinking of the visual sort of flow from the figures with the word balloon in the first panel to this, this hand across the top, and the circle for the coin, and then beneath it the oval of the word balloon. If I consider like where those shapes should fall and how large they should be, basically the visual flow told me that coin needed to be that size and it needed to be centered in the panel. And then I just draw everything around it, fill in the rest. What you're seeing behind the hand there is just a little bit of the painting or weaving, whatever it is on the wall. And it's just a little bit of this lion's elbow and the king's torso. And that's interesting too, because by drawing this free way at this thing, I have to consider what is the background at this moment. And you can adjust that. You can play with that because there could be a slight angle change. There could be a different lens, let's say lens on the camera, a different depth in the field of view. So you can play with that, but in this case, and in many cases, when you're moving just freely, the background can end up rather like you imagine in film too. A little blurry, a little out of focus, and a little random, just like random little blocks and blobs of shape and line. And that it looks like the setting, but it's not important. It doesn't have to be so in focus and such a clear part of the composition. It's just kind of that background layer that's kind of just all one thing. And so obviously we can do that by flattening that layer, that background visual layer, with less contrast, and by flattening it with more similar colors, a more limited color to it, and less strong colors, less bright and vivid colors. But when it comes to the line work and the penciling, the line work, especially with my style, when I like to use these heavy blocks of black, I have to find a way to just do a few little lines that kind of imply that something's there and it feels right. So that, again, one of these struggles that I have is between really clearly defining what something is with just a clear line work that defines this is a hand, this is hair. There's something kind of blocky and structural to it. Between that and just expressive lines that imply that something is something. Like that, that's just foliage. Maybe it's leaves, maybe it's branches, maybe it's a bush, but it's just there's a bunch of scribbles here. These are trees, vertical lines that kind of look organic, but they're not even fully drawn trees. It just implies trees. I do both. My style in the past especially has tended to be much more graphically like structured, clear shapes, clear lines representing clear things. Think like Mike Mignola's style. The heavy blacks and the clear defined shapes through these abstract simple lines. But I find that too limiting for the kind of visuals and stories that I want to draw and for the way I want to draw them, expressive. And so I lean more towards these expressive loose lines, especially for background elements. Which has led me to this point where I'm considering adjusting my inking style to using a nib, which I might do on the next page. You'll see here in this last panel, the painting is behind the father as he's putting his arm on his son, and he's grabbing him in a similar shape to the king in the painting. And so this is kind of implying that there's something about this lion, which sword was called a lion by the dragoness in Crocodile City. Like, it'll take all of us to slay this lion, referring to sword. And now here's sword in the position of the lion with the father, and it's just kind of also just an interesting image. It wasn't meant to be clearly one message. It was just, when I was drawing on page 10 before this one, the way I was constructing the room, it left a blank space there, and I thought, well, what should I put there? Let's make this a little less generic. A painting, or what should I put on it? Which led to, there could be some symbolism here. So I'm looking through ancient, art, and I'm finding an image that's very similar to this one of a king, grasping the lion by the throat. So I directly pulled that from what I searched online. But what it means here is not necessarily clear, but there's definitely, symbolism there. The king who's strong and grasps the strong lion by the throat and sort of controls it. And then here's the father gently, putting his hand on the son, who might also become this force like the lion. And it's definitely not a direct symbolism of what's happening, but it adds some interest. It's visually an idea, and it doesn't have to mean just one clear thing necessarily. If I were a total master at making comics, I would probably put a lot of symbolism into my comics. But for now, if I was a master, and if I took if my approach was to take a slower, longer amount of time on each page, on each step of the story, I would put more symbolism. But as it stands, as I'm constructing the drawings, I'm just keeping my mind open to finding symbolism that I can drop in by accident. And I don't think that's a bad way to go. because, this is cartooning, a term that, implies that it's done very loosely, it's done very quickly, and it's a cartoon, it's not real. And I'm okay with that, like a sort of the idea of uncanny valley, like if you see an animated film that's too realistic, it can be hard, it can feel strange and uncanny, and it can make it hard to emotionally connect with those characters because they're almost real, but not quite. And then if you have a cartoon that's clearly animated and exaggerated, somehow we're able to project our emotions onto it. So I think I find the same thing happening with comics. If the drawings are too realistic and too referenced, I find it difficult to emotionally connect with the story. And I find usually the images less readable in a quick gathering of the image in your mind. So you get slowed down in the reading process, and it disrupts the experience of the story moving forward. So there's that. In some ways, I've noticed my style is getting a little more realistic. And the reason for that comes down to when I'm practicing drawing anatomy and sketching people, it's really hard to maintain a really cartoony style. This is still cartooning. I'm still, just drawing these people from imagination, and it's not exactly realistic, of course. But through the practice, it becomes more natural to just draw a person in reality. If I were to draw a comic that was heavily stylized, I would have to not imagine real people, real actors acting things out and connecting with them directly. I would have to imagine my cartoons acting in a cartoon world. I would have to imagine the cartoon playing out and then draw those cartoon expressions and shapes, that style. And some people aren't that way, but for me, that's what it would be like. It would be like removing me from the story one degree. So I'd rather just be in it, and what I'm seeing is more like real people. Again, it's not realistic or like realism; it's still cartooning. But the more dynamic the camera angles and poses, the harder it gets for me to just go with simple shapes for the figures, because they get the expression. There's too much fluidity in the human body, too much movement and stuff to keep it so rigid. Yeah, I see that in there's artists I love that their anatomy isn't great. Let's say it's not so realistic, and they're able to bend and contort the rigid kind of structures that they use to draw people, and it looks cool. But for me, my style is not so ingrained that I can just stick with that from on and on, page to page, pose to pose. It's not ingrained enough. And so also knowing that I'm always learning and always getting better at drawing the human form, I can't stay married to a particular style of the way I stylize the human form. So it becomes safer to lean towards a more realistic human form, just so that you can develop as you go. Yeah, those are some ideas that I have about that process of, what style you draw with, and how that works. So Yeah, almost wrapping it up with the final inking with the brush. I'm spotting black. So in areas that are going to be more in shadow, like above that bookshelf or down into the shelf, there's a fireplace that's going, and that's so the light source is kind of to the left here. But that's part of my reasoning. But putting a Sword as a boy there, putting him with his back in shadow, it also helps define him and kind of bring him into the foreground by adding a more dark and more contrast on him. Here, the father, Sword's father. I could have put his back entirely in shadow, made that entirely black. But that technically the light source is right there behind him and to his right at an angle, but it's behind him. I could have added more black on his back anyways and just sort of cheated reality, cheated the lighting a bit. And I thought about doing that, but I thought sometimes adding more weight to the bottom of a panel helps ground it. It helps the composition look more solid. In this case, it's such a long panel. I wanted more black higher up on his figure and leave it white below, leave it as empty space. So you have this long panel with the word balloon at the top and empty space at the bottom, and the weight of it, the high contrast, the high amount of blacks is right there towards the center with Son and Sword, with Sword and his father there. So you don't always have to put, heavy blacks at the bottom of a panel or the top, just because you like to use heavy blacks like myself. This was a panel where I centered it more so, especially because it was long. The last panel, I did no word balloons. The father makes his last admonishing statement to his son, and then they just share a quiet moment with the clear symbolism behind them. This was, again, a decision I made in the moment. It's when I'm penciling this out that I decide, there really doesn't need to be a word balloon here. This feels like it flows well with a quiet moment. Now, that is also why I am doing my thumbnails right onto the large paper. I'm going right into a comic as I'm doodling it out, as I'm doing the thumbnails and stuff. Because only at that size, only at a full comic size, only at the actual thing I'm making can I really get a feel for should this be a quiet moment or not. It's sort of the idea of editing a movie after you film it and, and storyboard and all that. But at the end, you edit it. At the end, you add the music and stuff, and you try to get the tone right at the end. Well, to do that, to get the tone right, I've got to see a more finished product, like I'm at the end. And so I try to draw it and set it up where it gives me the impression more so of that finished product. I get to interact with the finished product as directly as possible for someone who's coloring digitally and lettering digitally. After this, getting in touch with that real thing that you're trying to make, so that you can have some feedback with it and actually improve it. Far too often I've finished a comic and then I look at the flow and I realize, this needed one more page, or I should have given a quiet moment here. And I wouldn't have been able to know that just from like a 2x1 thumbnail. So here is the finished page. Yes. Yeah, and again, I'm going to make a blog. See that in maybe a week, if not right away, maybe in a week, on cleverkaiju.com. And there's a link to that in the description. And that's where I'm going to share more of the choices I make, like in the writing and stuff. I might do some of that in videos here on YouTube, but I am finding it's all I can do to keep up with these videos. It's more work to make a video a blog seems like a more appropriate format for some of the things I could share. So keep an eye out for that if you're interested, and subscribe at the Clever Kaiju site too. That's going to be the main hub. I still have my website, ikecomics.com, but that's going to be a great hub for more. Be the practice of your art. Find others doing the same. See you next week.